The grand hall of the galactic Concord shimmered with opulence, its towering crystalline walls refracting the light from 1,000 suspended orbs. Yet, beneath the dazzling display of unity, whispers of distrust and subtle rivalries coiled like unseen serpents, threatening to disrupt the fragile balance. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered, their diverse forms reflecting the Concord's creed of unity and diplomacy. Yet, amidst this display of civility, a subtle tension rippled through the air. In a corner of the hall, humanity's delegation stood out. Clad in tailored suits with understated elegance, the human representatives exchanged polite smiles and firm handshakes with alien dignitaries. At the center of the group was Ambassador Rachel Marlowe, her sharp gaze scanning the crowd with practiced diplomacy. Humanity had recently gained full membership in the Concord, a decision that had not sat well with all. From across the hall, the representatives of the Zalkan Empire watched the humans with thinly veiled disdain. To the Zalkans, humanity's rapid rise within the Concord was a direct affront to their own carefully cultivated dominance, an insult magnified by the humans' refusal to bend to traditional hierarchies. The Zalkans, known for their rigid hierarchy and mastery of biochemical warfare, had long considered humanity an upstart species unworthy of the Concord's favor. To them, humanity's resilience was an insult, a defiance of the natural order. "They act as though they belong here," hissed Delegate Vrath, his scaled fingers coiling around the stem of a crystalline goblet. His companion, Delegate Selk, gave a slow, deliberate nod, his serpentine features twisted in a smirk. "Perhaps we should remind them of their place," Selk said, his voice low and conspiratorial. Vratha's golden eyes glinted with malice as he signaled a passing attendant, a Zalkan servant who carried an ornate tray of wine goblets. With a subtle motion, Vrath produced a vial from within his robes and tipped its contents into the goblets meant for humanity's delegation. Unaware of the Zalkan's machinations, Ambassador Marlowe raised her glass as a toast was called. The hall quieted as the Concord's High Chancellor, a being of shimmering energy, floated to the center of the room. "To unity," the High Chancellor intoned, its voice resonating through the chamber. "May our differences strengthen us and our shared purpose bind us." A chorus of agreement rippled through the assembly as glasses were raised. Marlowe's sharp instincts caught the briefest flicker of something unusual in the Zalkan's demeanor, a flash of anticipation too calculated to ignore. She made a mental note but said nothing, her diplomatic mask firmly in place. The humans drank deeply, their faces betraying no hint of suspicion. The Zalkans exchanged subtle glances, their smirks growing wider as they awaited the inevitable collapse. The poison, a Zalkan specialty, was designed to incapacitate most species within moments, its biochemical structure engineered to exploit the vulnerabilities of nearly every sentient physiology. For the humans, whose biology the Zalkans deemed fragile and unsophisticated, it should have been fatal. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The humans continued to mingle, their laughter and conversation flowing as naturally as the wine in their glasses. Ambassador Marlowe engaged with representatives from the Tylorians and Arkans, her tone poised and confident. The only noticeable change was the slight flush in her cheeks, a common side effect of wine. Vratha's smirk faltered as confusion flickered across his features. Selk leaned in, his serpentine voice a harsh whisper. "Why aren't they reacting?" Vratha's claws gripped his goblet tighter as panic began to seep into his expression. Before they could recover, Marlowe turned to face them, her gaze sharp and knowing. With deliberate steps, she approached the Zalkans, her glass still in hand. "Delegates Vrath and Selk," she said smoothly. "I hope you're enjoying the evening." Vratha's composure wavered for the briefest moment before he recovered. "Ambassador Marlowe," he replied, his tone saccharine. "Indeed it has been illuminating." Marlowe raised her glass in a mock toast. "To illumination then. And to our hosts for their exquisite hospitality." She sipped, her eyes never leaving Vratha's. The Zalkan delegate's claws tightened around his goblet, but he forced a smile. Back at the human quarters later that evening, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of relief and simmering resolve as Marlowe's team gathered to dissect the day's events. Lieutenant Ethan Cross, her security advisor, leaned against a console with a wry grin. "They really thought they could take us out with wine?" he said, shaking his head. "Amateurs." Marlowe smirked. "They underestimated us as always. The poison was clever, but it seems they've never encountered a species that willingly consumes toxins for recreation." Dr. Lila Vance, the delegation's biologist, chimed in. "The compound they used closely resembles ethanol's chemical structure. Our liver enzymes broke it down just like any other drink." Honestly, I'm more worried about what they'll try next. Marlowe nodded, her expression turning serious. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was an attempt to undermine humanity's standing in the Concord. The Zalkins want to paint us as fragile outsiders who don't belong. But we'll turn this narrative around, on our terms. The next evening, the Zalkins hosted a smaller, exclusive gathering in their private chambers, inviting only select representatives, including the humans. It was a calculated move, thinly veiled as diplomacy, but brimming with the promise of subtle intimidation and veiled threats. The Zalkins sought to reinforce their dominance, using the gathering as a stage for their schemes. Marlowe accepted without hesitation. As the humans entered the Zalkins' chambers, the air was thick with tension. The room was adorned with intricate tapestries and bioluminescent sculptures, a testament to Zalkin artistry. At the center, a long table was set with an elaborate feast. Vrath and Selk greeted them with exaggerated warmth. "Ambassador Marlowe," Vrath purred. "We are honored by your presence." "The honor is ours," Marlowe replied smoothly, her smile polite but guarded. "Your hospitality is as renowned as your ingenuity." Vrath's smile flickered, but he gestured for them to take their seats. As the meal progressed, the Zalkins' predatory eyes studied the humans intently, desperate to find cracks in their unflinching facade. Instead, they found only unflinching confidence. Marlowe and her team engaged in light conversation, their poise unshaken. As dessert was served, Marlowe raised her glass, the same crystalline goblet used the previous evening. "To our hosts," she said, her tone measured. "May our shared endeavors lead to greater understanding." She drank deeply, the room silent as the Zalkins watched her intently. Then she set her glass down with deliberate grace and fixed Vrath with a piercing gaze. "A fine vintage," she said. "Though I must admit, it lacks the complexity of our Terran spirits. Perhaps I could introduce you to some of our stronger drinks sometime?" The tension in the room was palpable as Vrath's composure cracked. Selk's tail twitched nervously, his gaze darting between Marlowe and his companion. The humans had not only survived their attack but were now toying with them, turning their own arrogance against them. Marlowe leaned back in her chair, her smile razor-sharp. The message was clear: humanity was not to be underestimated. The air in the Zalkins' private chambers remained tense, charged with unspoken animosity and the weight of unacknowledged defeat. Ambassador Rachel Marlowe's sharp words hung in the air, their implications unmistakable. The humans had not only survived the poisoned wine but had turned the attempt into an opportunity to assert their dominance. The Zalkins had never been challenged so deftly in their own domain, and the sting of humiliation was palpable. Vrath's claws tightened around his goblet, the crystalline stem trembling under his grip. Frustration churned within him, a toxic brew of humiliation and disbelief. How had these upstarts from a backwater world not only survived but managed to turn the situation to their advantage? Each sip they took had felt like a mockery of his carefully laid plans, a reminder that his perceived superiority had been undone by their resilience. He forced a smile, though the edges of his expression betrayed his growing frustration. "Ambassador Marlowe," he said with exaggerated courtesy, "perhaps you would enlighten us about these Terran spirits you so highly regard? I confess, the Zalkins pride themselves on refining the most exquisite beverages in the galaxy. I find it intriguing that your kind holds their own in such a domain." Marlowe's lips curled into a polite smile, her eyes gleaming with unspoken defiance. "Ah, Delegate Vrath, Terran spirits are not for the faint of heart. They are products of resilience, much like humanity itself. Perhaps in time you'll find the courage to sample them." The subtle jab drew quiet smirks from the human delegation and strained expressions from the Zalkins. Selk's serpentine tail twitched, a faint but telling sign of his growing irritation. The tension of the evening lingered in the air as Marlowe and her team returned to their quarters, their minds racing with the implications of the Zalkins' actions. After the cultural exchange concluded with resounding applause, the team returned to their quarters, the weight of their success mingling with anticipation of the Zalkins' next move. Back in their quarters, Marlowe and her team gathered for an urgent debrief. The exclusive gathering had concluded without further incident, but the Zalkins' behavior had made one thing abundantly clear: the attempt to poison the humans was not an isolated act of malice. It was a calculated move in a larger, more insidious campaign. "They're testing us," Lieutenant Ethan Cross said, his tone grim. "Trying to find cracks in our armor. They want to push us into making a mistake, something they can exploit." Dr. Lila Vance nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "The poison wasn't just about killing us. It was a psychological attack meant to sow doubt and fear. They wanted to see if we'd crumble under pressure. Marlowe paced the room, her mind racing through possibilities. Then we need to show them that humanity doesn't crack under pressure. We adapt. We endure. And we thrive. Cross leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What's the next move? Marlowe paused, a determined glint in her eye. We need to shift the narrative. The Zalkins want to paint us as fragile, out of place in the Concorde. Let's remind them of who we are, survivors of Earth's unrelenting challenges, like the ice age that pushed us to innovate fire and shelter, or the space race that took us to the stars. Humanity has always turned adversity into opportunity, and we are the architects of technologies that have revolutionized survival itself. Humanity is not just a participant in this alliance, we're an equal. The opportunity to execute Marlowe's plan came sooner than expected. 2 days after the tense dinner, the High Chancellor announced a cultural exchange event, inviting delegations to showcase the unique strengths and traditions of their respective worlds. It was a diplomatic gesture meant to foster unity, but for humanity, it was the perfect stage to assert their place among the galaxy's most powerful species. We'll present a demonstration of Terran ingenuity and resilience, Marlowe declared during the planning session. Something that embodies who we are and what we bring to the table. Like what? Cross asked, leaning back in his chair. A tech display? Combat simulations? Dr. Vance shook her head. Those would just reinforce the stereotypes they already have about us. We need something unexpected. Something that challenges their assumptions? Marlowe smiled. Exactly. And I think I know just the thing. The cultural exchange event was held in the central plaza of the Concorde's capital station, a vast open space surrounded by towering spires and holographic displays. The air buzzed with an electric hum, mingling with the faint aroma of alien spices and metallic tang of advanced machinery, creating an atmosphere brimming with anticipation. Delegations from dozens of species had set up elaborate exhibits, each showcasing the best of their worlds. The Zalkins booth was particularly grand, featuring intricate sculptures and samples of their famed biochemical creations. The human delegation, by contrast, kept their setup deceptively simple. A single table stood at the center of their booth, upon which rested an assortment of glass bottles filled with amber and clear liquids. Behind the table stood Marlowe and Dr. Vance, their expressions calm but confident. As the event progressed, curious onlookers began to gather around the human exhibit. What is this? A Tylorian delegate asked, their translucent wings fluttering with curiosity. Spirits, Marlowe explained with a smile. Drinks distilled and perfected on Earth, each a testament to our species' resilience and creativity. The Tylorian tilted their head. And what makes them unique? They're not just beverages, Dr. Vance interjected. They're a celebration of survival. Each one carries the story of a people who have faced adversity and emerged stronger. The murmurs grew as more delegates approached, drawn by the humans' enigmatic display. Among them were Vrath and Selk, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Ambassador Marlowe, Vrath drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. Surely you don't expect the galaxy to take you seriously over a few bottles of primitive concoctions? Marlowe's smile didn't waver. Delegate Vrath, why don't you try a sample and decide for yourself? Vrath hesitated, his pride warring with his curiosity. His claws hovered over the glass, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. To refuse would appear weak, yet to partake felt like conceding to their confidence. Finally, with a sharp inhale, he picked up the glass and took a tentative sip. The fiery liquid burned its way down, igniting a trail of heat that left him momentarily breathless. His expression shifted as the fiery liquid coursed through him, a flicker of shock betraying the facade of neutrality he desperately clung to. This is, Vrath stammered, his usual composure slipping. Strong, Marlowe finished for him, her smile sharpening. Much like humanity. The demonstration quickly became the highlight of the event. Delegates from across the Concorde marveled at the complexity and intensity of the Terran spirits, their respect for humanity growing with each sip. The Zalkins' attempt to undermine the humans had backfired spectacularly, their arrogance eclipsed by the very resilience they had sought to dismiss. As the event drew to a close, Marlowe stood at the center of the human exhibit, addressing the gathered crowd. Humanity is no stranger to adversity, she said, her voice steady and commanding. We have faced challenges that would break others, like the famines that taught us to innovate agriculture, or the storms that inspired us to harness the wind, and we have emerged stronger each time. These spirits are more than drinks. They are symbols of our determination, our ingenuity, and our unyielding spirit. And let this serve as a reminder, we may be new to the Concord, but we are here to stay. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound reverberating through the plaza. Among the cheers, Vrath and Selk slithered away, their defeat evident in their downcast expressions. Humanity had not only survived but had thrived, turning the tables on their adversaries in a way that none could ignore. The applause still echoed in the central plaza as the human delegation packed their exhibit. The Terran spirits had been an undeniable success, and humanity's position within the Galactic Concord was more secure than ever. But Ambassador Rachel Marlowe knew this victory would not be without consequences. The Zalkins would not let the humiliation go unanswered. They'll retaliate, Lieutenant Ethan Cross said as they made their way back to the delegation's quarters. Vrath and Selk are too prideful to let this slide. Marlowe nodded, her expression thoughtful. Good. Let them try. The more they push, the more they reveal their hand. Dr. Lila Vance adjusted the straps on her equipment case, her brow furrowed. We need to be ready for anything. If the Zalkins were willing to risk poisoning us at a Concord event, there's no telling what they'll do next. Agreed, Marlowe said. We'll reconvene tomorrow to strategize. For now, let's get some rest. That rest would prove to be short-lived. In the early hours of the morning, an alert sounded through the human quarters. Marlowe was already awake, seated at her desk and reviewing reports, when Lieutenant Cross burst into the room. Ambassador, we have a situation, he said, his tone clipped. Marlowe rose immediately. What is it? An explosion, Cross replied. In the eastern wing of the Concord station. It's being investigated as an attack. Marlowe's eyes narrowed. Casualties? Several injured, no fatalities reported yet, Cross said. But the timing is suspicious, given yesterday's events. Marlowe grabbed her communicator and headed for the door. Let's move. I want eyes on this immediately. The eastern wing of the station was a chaotic scene. Emergency crews worked tirelessly to contain the damage, their equipment whirring and sparking as they navigated the rubble. Delegates from various species stood in clusters, murmuring in hushed tones. The atmosphere was heavy with fear and suspicion. As Marlowe and her team arrived, they were met by Commander Reiner, a Zelthan officer tasked with station security. His exoskeletal armor gleamed under the emergency lighting as he approached them. Ambassador Marlowe, Reiner said, his voice low but urgent. Thank you for coming. We're still assessing the situation, but preliminary evidence suggests sabotage. Marlowe's jaw tightened. Do you have any suspects? Reiner hesitated. It's too early to say definitively, but there are indications that the explosive device used a biochemical trigger. The type of compound points to the Zalkins. Cross let out a low whistle. They're not even trying to hide it? Or they want us to think they're not, Marlowe said. Either way, this is a direct challenge. We need to handle this carefully. Reiner nodded. I'll ensure you're kept informed as the investigation progresses. Back in the human quarters, the team gathered for an emergency meeting. Marlowe's demeanor was calm but resolute as she addressed her team. This attack was designed to destabilize us, she said. Whether it was the Zalkins or someone framing them, the goal is the same, to undermine humanity's position in the Concord. So what do we do? Dr. Vance asked. Marlowe leaned forward, her hands resting on the table. We outmaneuver them. The Zalkins rely on subterfuge and fear. Let's show the Concord that we stand for transparency and unity. Cross frowned. How do we do that without playing into their hands? Marlowe's eyes gleamed with determination. We take the lead on the investigation. Offer our resources, our expertise. Make it clear that we're here to strengthen the Concord, not weaken it. If the Zalkins are responsible, their guilt will be evident. If they're not, we gain credibility for acting in the Concord's best interest. The team nodded, their resolve strengthening under Marlowe's leadership. The following day, Marlowe's proposal to assist with the investigation was met with mixed reactions. Some delegates welcomed the offer, recognizing humanity's growing reputation for problem-solving. Others, including the Zalkins, viewed it with suspicion. Ambassador Marlowe, Vrath said during a council session, his tone icy. While we appreciate your enthusiasm, one might question whether your involvement is entirely impartial. Marlowe met his gaze steadily. Impartiality is precisely why humanity should lead this effort. We have no entrenched alliances or biases within the Concord. Our interest is in finding the truth and ensuring the safety of all member species. Vrath's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing further. The Council approved humanity's participation in the investigation, though it was clear that not everyone was pleased with the decision. As the investigation progressed, humanity's contributions proved invaluable. Dr. Vance's expertise in biochemistry allowed her to analyze the remnants of the explosive device, uncovering crucial details about its composition. Cross-coordinated with station security to enhance surveillance and identify potential leads. Marlowe worked tirelessly to maintain diplomatic channels, ensuring that the investigation remained focused and impartial. It wasn't long before a breakthrough came. The biochemical trigger used in the explosive bore a unique marker, a compound that was indeed of Zalkin origin. However, further analysis revealed subtle modifications that didn't align with standard Zalkin technology. It's a forgery, Dr. Vance concluded during a late-night briefing. Someone went to great lengths to make it look like the Zalkins were responsible, but the details don't match their usual methods. Marlowe's expression darkened. Who benefits from framing the Zalkins? Cross crossed his arms. Could be someone trying to spark a conflict. If the Concorde fractures, it'd leave a power vacuum for opportunists. Then we need to expose this for what it is, Marlowe said firmly. The Concorde's unity depends on it. The findings were presented during a special council session. Marlowe stood before the assembly, her voice steady and commanding as she detailed the evidence. Holographic projections displayed the biochemical analysis, highlighting the discrepancies that pointed to forgery. This attack was not the work of the Zalkins, she concluded. It was an attempt to manipulate us, to sow division within the Concorde. But humanity stands for unity, and we will not allow fear and deception to dictate our actions. The council chamber buzzed with discussion as delegates absorbed the information. Vrath and Selk exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions a mixture of relief and frustration. While the findings cleared their species of guilt, the revelation of manipulation left them feeling exposed. The High Chancellor floated to the center of the chamber, its luminous form radiating approval. Humanity has demonstrated exceptional leadership and dedication to the Concorde's principles. Let this serve as a reminder that our strength lies in our unity. The chamber erupted in applause, the sound echoing through the station. Marlowe's gaze swept over the assembly, her resolve unshaken. The threat to the Concorde had been neutralized, but she knew the challenges were far from over. Let them come, she thought to herself. Humanity is ready. The atmosphere in the Concorde's Grand Council chamber was electric. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the room, their voices blending into a symphony of tension and anticipation. The faint hum of holographic displays and the subdued glow of ambient lights added to the charged ambience, casting shifting shadows that seemed to echo the stakes at hand. The aftermath of the recent revelations about the sabotage attempt had rippled through the political fabric of the Alliance, forcing every species to re-evaluate their alliances and intentions. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Rachel Marlowe stood poised, her confidence radiating like a beacon. Her team had uncovered the truth behind the attempted framing of the Zalkins, and today's session would decide the repercussions. The stakes were high, and Marlowe knew that humanity's position in the Concorde hung in the balance. The High Chancellor's luminous form floated to the center, its voice reverberating through the chamber. Ambassador Marlowe, the floor is yours. Marlowe stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She activated a holographic display, projecting the evidence her team had meticulously gathered. The chamber dimmed as the images of the explosive device and its forged biochemical signature appeared, accompanied by detailed analysis. Honored delegates, Marlowe began, her tone measured yet firm, we stand at a crossroads. The attack on the Concorde was not merely an act of violence, it was an act of manipulation, designed to fracture our unity and sow distrust among us. Let us not forget the Solari crisis, where this council stood together against overwhelming odds to preserve peace. Unity is our greatest strength, and we must not allow it to be undermined. Humanity's investigation has revealed the truth. The device was forged to implicate the Zalkins, but the true perpetrators remain hidden in the shadows. The chamber buzzed with murmurs. Vrath and Selk sat stiffly in their seats, their usual arrogance replaced by a simmering unease. While the evidence cleared the Zalkins of guilt, the exposure of manipulation painted them in a vulnerable light. What do you propose, Ambassador? A Zelthan delegate asked, their voice cutting through the noise. Marlowe met their gaze. I propose that we stand together as the Concorde was intended. Humanity is prepared to lead an independent task force to investigate this matter further, ensuring impartiality and transparency. Our history within the Concorde is marked by our balanced approach and commitment to fairness, as demonstrated during the Athenar mediation, where humanity's even-handed diplomacy resolved a decades-long dispute. Let this be a message to those who seek to divide us. We will not be swayed by fear or deception. The chamber erupted into debate. Some delegates supported Marlowe's proposal, while others questioned humanity's motives. Amid the chaos, the High Chancellor called for order, its luminous form pulsing with authority. Enough, the Chancellor said. The ambassador's proposal will be put to a vote. In the meantime, I urge all members to consider the importance of unity in the face of such threats. As the session adjourned, Marlowe and her team retreated to their quarters. Lieutenant Ethan Cross leaned against the console, his expression grim. Think they'll vote in our favor? Marlowe exhaled slowly. They have to. The evidence is irrefutable, and the Concord knows it can't afford internal strife right now. Dr. Lila Vance chimed in. Even if they vote yes, the real challenge will be uncovering the true perpetrators. Whoever they are, they've already proven they're willing to go to great lengths to destabilize us. Cross nodded. And they'll be twice as careful now that their plan's been exposed. Marlowe's gaze hardened. Then we'll be twice as determined. 2 days later, the vote was held. The Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity, the tension palpable as the High Chancellor announced the results. The Concord has voted to approve Ambassador Marlowe's proposal. Humanity will lead the independent task force, with full access to resources and cooperation from all member species. A wave of reactions rippled through the room. Some delegates applauded, while others exchanged wary glances. Vrath and Selk remained stone-faced, their claws tapping rhythmically against their seats. Marlowe inclined her head respectfully toward the Chancellor. Thank you, honored delegates. Humanity will not take this responsibility lightly. We will work tirelessly to uncover the truth and protect the Concord from further harm. As the session concluded, Marlowe's team gathered in their operations room. The approval was a victory, but the road ahead was fraught with danger. Cross pulled up a series of intercepted communications, his brow furrowing as he analyzed the data. We've identified several anomalies in recent communications, he said. Encrypted transmissions from unknown sources, routed through neutral systems. Whoever's behind this is covering their tracks well. Dr. Vance examined the data over his shoulder. These patterns are sophisticated, but they're not unbreakable. If we can isolate the origin point, we might get a lead. Marlowe nodded. Good. Focus on that. The sooner we have actionable intel, the better. Days turned into weeks as the task force worked tirelessly. Humanity's leadership in the investigation garnered both respect and scrutiny from the Concord's members. The team faced constant challenges, from encrypted data trails to covert interference, but their determination never wavered. Finally, a breakthrough came. Cross burst into the operations room, a triumphant glint in his eyes. We've got it. The origin point of the transmissions, it's coming from a station in the Erythian Belt. A sprawling expanse of asteroid clusters and rogue installations, the Erythian Belt is notorious for harboring smugglers, mercenaries and black market hubs outside Concord jurisdiction. Marlowe straightened. Then that's where we go. The team mobilized quickly, boarding a stealth frigate provided by the Concord. The journey to the Erythian Belt was tense, every moment filled with preparation and anticipation. As the station came into view, its sprawling labyrinthine structure loomed like a shadow against the stars. Remember, Marlowe said, addressing her team, we're here to gather intel, not start a war. Keep it quiet, keep it focused. Cross smirked. Subtlety is my middle name. Dr. Vance rolled her eyes. Just don't blow anything up. The infiltration was swift and efficient. Marlowe's team navigated the station's winding corridors, avoiding detection as they closed in on their target. The intelligence led them to a central hub, where a series of encrypted servers housed the transmission source. As Vance worked to extract the data, Cross kept watch, his hand resting on his sidearm. How much longer? Almost there, Vance replied, her fingers flying across the console. Just need to bypass this last layer of encryption. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Marlowe signaled for silence, her team blending into the shadows. A group of armed figures passed by, their conversation revealing snippets of a larger conspiracy. They won't know what hit them, one said. The next phase will make the Concord crumble. Marlowe's jaw tightened. They were on the right track. Vance finished the extraction, her voice low but urgent. Got it? Let's move. The team retreated the way they came, their hearts pounding as they evaded patrols and made their way back to the frigate. As the engines roared to life and the station faded into the distance, Marlowe reviewed the data they had retrieved. Her eyes narrowed as the pieces began to fall into place. The conspiracy was deeper and more dangerous than they had imagined. But now they had the evidence to fight back. "Prepare the report," she said. "The Concorde needs to see this. And we need to be ready for whatever comes next, because if their plans succeed, it could destabilize everything we've worked to build."